traffic, Copeland 4041 uniform, departing 11 glider and
You could kind of get up around Montlucon, and then you would have to go through this weak area to get away, and then if you went far enough north, it would get better. And then getting back was always very challenging, and that was a very big theme of this contest.
I just came back from coaching at the National Juniors competition in the Netherlands, and it was a lot of fun. It is a very relaxed competition that so many pilots fly as their first competition.
This is Soaring the Sky, a glider pilot's podcast, coming to you from the Mid-Atlantic region here in the United States and bringing you great soaring content from glider pilots all over the globe. We now join Chuck and our guest pilot.
Hello, soaring community. Great to have you join us today. Normally Chuck would be chatting with you, but he has temporarily lost his voice, so he has asked me to tell you about this exciting episode we have lined up for you. Today we head to the 36th World Gliding Championship in Montlucon, France, as Chuck interviews one of the pilots who competed in this year's event. All eyes were on France, since the Worlds in Germany was canceled this year. Our guest pilot, Daniel Sazhin, shares his recent soaring adventure that starts in New Jersey as he heads across the Atlantic to fly in one of the biggest contests of his soaring career. Flying Simon also returns for another segment of Simon Says on this episode as he returns from the National Junior Competition in the Netherlands. He has been there before, but this time as a coach. So if you're ready, let's launch episode 102.
You know, our sponsors mean a lot to us, and one of those important sponsors is Aerox Aviation Oxygen Systems. They are number one in portable and engineered oxygen systems and your source for FAA-approved oxygen mask and portable systems. Aerox recently introduced the Aerox Pro 2 Plus Flight Bag portable oxygen system. This thing is small, lightweight, and it is super simple to use. The Pro 2 Plus is perfect for that occasional user who wants the flexibility to access those higher altitudes without having to worry about flying impaired. It's now available at Aerox distributors and, of course, at aerox.com. So remember our friends at Aerox, engineered for aviators. Daniel Sazhin, how you doing?
Doing wonderful. How are you, Chuck?
I'm doing great. Welcome back to the podcast. I think the last time we spoke, you were competing in the Club Class Nationals there in Chilhowie, right?
Yeah, I think that's about right. And you gave me a call, and it was kind of an impromptu thing, wasn't it? It
was
very, very nice.
It was a lot of fun, but I did put you on the spot.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. It was a fun contest.
You have had quite an eventful soaring season. So you recently just returned not too long ago from competing in the 36th World Gliding Champions there in Montlucon, France. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but
yeah, it was a very nice contest. Very, very fair go for us. And Montlucon, France, to have that kind of interesting little squiggly on the C that makes it sound more like an S. Was a very interesting site to fly at. That's for sure. It, certainly not what I was quite expecting out of the site.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing about it. But before we get into that, we do have a lot of new listeners here on the pod that may not be aware of your aviation journey. So maybe if you can just give me a quick review on how and when you entered the world of soaring.
Oh well, I'm 27 years old, but I've been around soaring since I was about 11. And my older brother learned to fly at Blairstown, and I kind of hung around the airport when he was doing that. And I got into gliders, he got into airplanes, and I stuck around with gliders, and kind of here I am. And along the way, I got into flying cross country and the soaring side of things, and got into competition flying, and that has been a very fun, fruitful run of sorts. There's been a lot of really interesting flights over the years. I think that's a reasonable introduction. What do you think?
I believe that's great. Now, can you walk us through what it takes to get ready for an event like this? I mean, this not only is it a huge event, but it's in another country. I mean, this had to have been a lot of work for you just to get there. What was that journey like?
Well, and I'd like to add too that The logistics in this particular event were even trickier by virtue of all this the COVID situation occurring. Because, like, for example, the other event at Stendhal in Germany, the other classes got canceled this year, unfortunately. So there was only one of two worlds, and the result is that we for many months we really didn't know if it was going to happen or not, and so a lot of the things that we would do beforehand we weren't able to do. But the kinds of things you need to do to be able to go to an event like this is certainly, deal with having a vehicle, having a glider, having a crew, and and then your own kind of logistics of getting out abroad, and not to mention all the COVID kind of administrative stuff that we had to deal with. And I also would like to make a note that Colin Mead, who was our captain, did an excellent job in helping us with all those things, and he really facilitated in kind of in dealing with all these other hurdles and headaches that would have otherwise been kind of really complicated the process for us.
Do you transport a glider there? Do you fly something that's already there? How did that work?
Yeah, so one of our team members transported his GS3 over, and that worked out very nicely for him. Certainly some people do that, but particularly in club class, which is the class that I've flown in quite a bunch, the gliders to rent are considerably less expensive than shipping a glider across, and not to mention the fact that I don't have a club class glider of my own, so that's
Right.
a moot point. But even given, it's just considerably less expensive to rent on the spot, and to our network of people that we know over the years.
So how many days did it actually take to get there? Was it one long day, or with the COVID and all of that, what did you have to go through?
Oh, it took us out. Well, so I think I calculated that I had, I think it was 7 or 8 steps worth of transportation over the span of 3 days to get from Philadelphia to Montlucon. And so, first going to my, parents' house in Brooklyn, dropping off my car. They drive me to the airport. Then I take an airplane over to Paris, at which point I take a train over to a club member that lent me his car. And then I take the car over to Switzerland to pick up the glider. And from there, I finally take the glider over to the airport. So I figured those are, 7 distinct steps, and that took
Wow.
a couple days. It was a lot of work. And then you had to repeat it repeat it in reverse.
Planes, trains, and automobiles.
Exactly correct. It's a lot of work for us to go to the worlds. The Europeans, they typically get to fly their own gliders. They get to set them up all winter, and they get all totally comfortable in them. I mean, it's a really wonderful treat.
Right.
We don't get that luxury. We show up and get there a couple days before the meet begins, and you open up the box and you hope the thing flies. But I was very
Yeah,
lucky in that
exactly.
respect. I had a very nice glider.
So you arrive,
So
and then what? I mean, do you have some practice days? How did that work out?
yeah, normally it depends on the weather, of course. But basically, JP and I, he was my teammate in club class and longtime teammates. The 4th time he's flown with me at a Worlds. The previous 3 in juniors. I mean, we flew together before we got there, so we kind of reviewed our team flying stuff and all this kind of thing. So really, the only thing we were kind of working out was getting the glider flying and making sure that all the avionics worked and all these kinds of things. Maybe getting a pattern or two at the airport just to get a good lay of the land. And then anything beyond that was a plus. In this case, I was really compressed with the amount of time that I had. I mean, I really squeezed out every last, every hour that I could possibly can to go to this meet. But I've been pretty busy in my PhD work, and so I only got to do one flight before the contest began.
Oh, wow.
But that actually still worked out okay. I mean, the glider flew really, really well. I mean, the glider was really perfectly tuned, and it was perfectly tuned for my weight. And so, basically, that the one flight, I had a couple notes as to just make a couple little tweaks to the electronics, and then the glider was completely race ready. So I was very satisfied and very lucky in that respect, and that was thanks to Ross Drake, who is a a Kiwi, New Zealander, who works and lives in Switzerland, who restores gliders, and he was the one who rented me this particular HW20, and he did just an absolutely fantastic job on it. So I've never had a glider that was that perfect and ready to fly, and just no issues. So that I would have liked to have a couple more days, just if I had a chance to relax and get to fly around there some more, but but everything was that's just the way it had to be, and because the rig was perfect, that's all it took. That's all it was necessary in this particular event.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So can you put us in the cockpit now there in France and take us on one of those flights? It can be any of those days. From the launch until you landed, the train, the competition, what type of lift, all that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the experience flying in Montlucon, I mean, we very, we use the expression Groundhog Day quite a lot. So there were definitely days that were better for us, and there were days that were worse. But the themes across the contest were pretty strong on most of the days. For the most part, Montlucon is kind of it's in a little bit of a hole of sorts. It's just the weather-wise, and it's just not that strong out there, and different people have different theories, but it actually seems to be just a kind of a consistent theme for people flying out in that area. And interestingly, something that I did not expect is you actually have high, like the terrain gets slowly higher and higher the further south and east you go. There's a kind of a volcanic area out there, dead volcanoes. But you would, kind of looking at the lay of the land, looking at the geography, you would expect that the good soaring would be to the south and east, because that's where the higher, drier ground is. But that's exactly not what happens out there.
Oh,
That's to the south, the terrain gets higher, but the cloud base doesn't get any higher, so you really can't fly south. And the net effect is the area, the soaring around Montlucon is pretty marginal, and it gets a bit better to the north. But the trouble is that the airspace by a city, I think, called Avoord, really kind of blocks things off. And so you end up having these kind of, you could go a little bit north, and then you can sort of run this kind of east-west corridor, or you can go north along the edge of the airspace toward a commonly known glider port called Issoudun, and the weather tends to get a little better out there. However, the trouble, the challenges, is that immediately to the north, where the terrain starts to drop off, it often that area seemed to be just pretty saturated from a lot of rain, and so you could kind of get up around Montlucon, and then you would have to go through this weak area to get away, and then if you went far enough north, it would get better, and then getting back was always very challenging. And that was a very big theme of this contest. I mean, normally, the way you normally think about a final glide, and I'm sure you've experienced some of these, maybe, but if you're flying a racing task, you really want to kind of, and you're racing other folks, you want to get onto final glide as soon as you can and get home. Hopefully not take too much of a gamble and come up short. Well, the normal experience when you go to most contests, such as the club class nationals in Tennessee, is, you get maybe 300 feet short of someone else, after you fly with them for a while, maybe you don't center a thermal so well, or something like that. And then you hit the next thermal 300 feet low, right? You have a 3-knot thermal for your final glide, and then you see them leave, and you say, you kind of look up and you kind of grit your teeth a little bit that you lost a couple hundred feet. And then, hey, you a minute later, you get on final glide, and then you go, and then you chase them home, and you feel bad about losing a minute, that was like, because that was the deal there. Well, Montlucon is very different because the last thermal of the day, it will be 30 feet a minute. So if things work out for you and you get there 300 feet lower than the other guy, that's not going to, you're going to spend 10 more minutes in that thermal to get on a marginal final glide. Right. However, half the time, 5 minutes in, the bubble is going to give out on you, and you're going to be coming up short and landing in a field short of the airport, maybe in the finish sector, but nonetheless low. And if you're unluckier yet, you'll be landing in a field well short and not even completing the task.
Oh, yeah.
And there were many, and the final glides were often done from 2,000 feet AGL, 2,500 feet AGL. I mean, they were just these. It's like a lot of times we think of a final glide where you're going nice and fast, and you're going like 20 miles or something like that. Here, it was more like a Foley flop, a high jump, where you just sort of hop over, kind of flop over the finish, and then just kind of plop it on home,
Right.
And I've never flown at a site where the final glides were that persistently and consistently challenging to get to, because when you'd be coming in from pretty much any direction, you had to cross it would not get you the good terrain, or where you can get reasonable, so like get a reasonable thermal, it would never be quite enough to get you home, and so you'd have to go into this miserable low ground, wet ground, to be able to find the last thermal, and it always was a real challenge at the end of the day. So those are the general themes. In terms of how high, I mean, we spent a lot of the contest. I mean, I spoke a lot in meters, but I'll kind of transition back to imperial units. 3,000 feet felt high out there. I mean, it felt like you were really solidly racing at that time, and we spent a lot of time down at 2,000 feet, even down to 1,800 feet. When you were like, we had a couple times where we got to like 3,500, 4,000 AGL. It's like, man, that's really cooking. But it was, the conditions were very weak, and also notably too, one theme, or one word I used a lot, was they were heterogeneous, meaning, typically, you get to, I don't know, 4,000 feet, 5,000 feet, and you fly around here, and you pick up a 3-knot thermal, you pick up a 3-knot thermal, you pick up a 3-knot thermal, and you reasonably expect the next thermal and maybe a couple thereafter are going to be 3 knots, and you're going to say, okay, aside from if you're going to go into some, really wet ground, or some really problematic area, that you would expect that what the lift was doing is going to be more or less what it's going to do for a little while.
Yeah.
Out there, that's you never just you very, very quickly learned that that as you're climbing up, that you can never depend on, you can never count on the next thermal being anywhere. Every single time you had to completely reassess the sky, more or less, and that was kind of a notable theme, that it just the thermals and the terrain, they just shifted around a tremendous amount, and you have to be very careful not to let yourself get too lulled into a groove, because 1 or 2 or 3 thermals later, you would find yourself down in the dirt again.
Oh yeah.
So it was very, very interesting flying.
I do want to thank our longtime sponsor of the show. We are so honored to have the support of the Southern California Soaring Academy. They are doing meaningful and almost monthly now nonprofit outreach work with local area veterans and also young people in STEM programs at their top-notch glider port facility located just outside of Los Angeles, there in the high desert of Southern California. They also have a fantastic flight school there, and they are continuing to turn out great glider pilots every month. If you'd like to donate to their nonprofit initiatives or learn more about their flight school, please pop over to the website at soaringacademy.org or check them out on Instagram at Soaring Academy. I think I might know the answer to this one, but what was your favorite day of the competition?
I had 2 very good days. One day, that the answer to that one is the one day that I won. The one day where I was one of 2 people to make it back. That was certainly very, very nice. I like to say, given the choice between being lucky and good, I'll take lucky any day, and that was a very lucky day for me. And there was another day I came in third, and that was a very nice day. But overall, though, for the most part, I felt pretty good about my flying out there. There was only really one day after there was a land out that basically took me out of the running, because I came up a couple hundred feet short on final glide and didn't make it home when a lot of other people did. And I can speak to that maybe a little bit later. But the next day I just did not feel like, it was a miserable, blue, windy day, and at one point I just felt my motivation sap out of me, and and then I landed out much with having done much less distance than I should have given. So, and then I saw a whole bunch of people went considerably further than I expected. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then I got my motivation back into the contest, and the next day then I won. So that was very nice.
Nice.
But basically, pretty much aside from the one day when I got demotivated, it's I felt really good about my flying out there, and and there were kind of some very substantial fluctuations in performance, but the thing, it doesn't really convey just how precise the margins were. Like, we really don't really often fly in where every single foot matters, and where if you turn left or you turn right in a given, when you're entering a thermal, or like all these little fine nuances. And and some days, some, like, you go and make a couple of those decisions, and all of a sudden it's worth a couple hundred points, right? And and sometimes it ends up working out for you, and sometimes it doesn't. But it just, the level of flying that was done out there was just really, 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 really cool. And like, I really felt honored, and I really enjoyed, engaging in that on a routine basis. It's just amazing that you can fly that precisely, and and see all that matter as much as it does. Sure, it's very nice to win a day, but it also, but for the most part, that it's just, even going through the grind of it, and just seeing people, like, all the time doing so well, was just really, 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 really cool, and really inspiring.
What do you think, being a pilot here on the East Coast of the United States, we're used to scraping out those thermals we don't have those big booming thermals always like they do out west. Do you think that helped you out?
It certainly did, but I also would like to make a note that to our West Coast friends, that Tim Taylor had a really good run in this contest, and he's very solidly a West Coast pilot. Flies out of Logan, Utah, and he seemed to really figure this one out. And he had a couple really good days on his own account. So, but that being said, though, I would say that like, certainly being comfortable, kind of flying around in the week, helps. And also, I honestly, probably be, even aside from that, the other thing that's really helpful, in these kinds of contests, you land out a lot. You can land out and have a really good performance because everyone else lands out, right? And aside from just learning to thermal well, and thermal in weak conditions and things like that, just being comfortable, picking out a field, and making an approach, and a safe landing, and all that. That, I don't think that if you only fly out west, and you may very well land out, but you're probably not going to be landing. You're probably going to be landing at an airport, right? It's just it's a different mindset, and
yeah, right.
It's not so much that it's necessarily, in all respects, harder, because it's just, it's a different pace to it, right? You're, like, you out west, you might spend 5-10 minutes in a thermal, and you'll gain 5,000 feet, right?
Yeah.
Out there, you'll spend 10 minutes in a thermal, and you'll gain 500 feet. But but the thing is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because if everyone else is doing that, and you can work the thermal, then that's all right. But I think being comfortable landing out, and being and in being like, and having done that a bunch, that's certainly something that we do. That happens quite a bit more often out east than it does out west, or at least when it comes to farmers' fields. And I think that's an important part of this contest.
So, of course, as glider pilots, we're always looking for new content on soaring. So, for those that are not familiar with your blog, can you talk a bit about that and how we can find it?
Yeah, well, I like to write on my blog called The Soaring Economist. The reason it's called that is because I initially envisioned it as kind of the place where I go and write about theory, and especially how kind of soaring relates to kind of things that we learned about in psychology and economics, behavioral economics, and kind of explored those ideas. And I have done that at length in years past. But I also, I like to go and blog about my flying. And I used to do that on Facebook, but then Facebook is really not a great place to post pictures and write extensive things. So I kind of merge those together, and hence, you can go and find my soaring writing, and you can find, my write-ups about my kind of the daily reports from the contest on that site. And feel free to go check it out. Feel free to read it. You could certainly see kind of the detailed play-by-play for all the flying that we did out there.
So, Daniel, after a typical day of competing, what was your evenings like? This really doesn't have anything to do with soaring, but you're in another country, so did you get a chance to see the countryside on the ground?
So, along those lines, actually, the most evenings, not really. And the reason is because we,
Not really.
we got back. I mean, the days lasted quite late. It's just the ways the kind of the sunset and the time zones were. So, and the fact it's summer, so we had days where we would be landing between 6:30 and 7:30. Quite often. And
Oh, wow.
by the time we broke the glider down and all that, I mean, we were back in our where we lived around 9 o'clock, and then go get some food and then write up the blog report and go to bed. So it was the evenings
Yeah.
were quite late. But there were days that we got to go and do things, and there were rain days, and not many actually, surprisingly. And there was a rest day on a non-flyable day after international night, and on those days we certainly took advantage of getting to explore the countryside, which is really beautiful.
Was there one particular thing about France that stood out that you really enjoyed?
The not one particular thing, right? Because there were many, right? And I've also been to the country a couple times
Right.
beforehand. But in this particular visit, the kinds of things that were very enjoyable, as as it were. I would say the thing that stood out in this trip, right? We talked about the countryside, is that I've never really been in this kind of deeply rural part of France. I mean, France. My experience in France was in the past was much more kind of the cities and or the kind of the coastal, more touristy kind of areas, and so it was really, really interesting and to see this kind of rolling farmland that you would kind of more experience in the Midwest.
Oh, nice.
And kind of see, and it's so you could think of like being out in Ohio or something like that, and then and seeing periodically all sorts of little castles and little medieval towns and things like that.
Right.
And that's just so it's a bit of a contrast.
Oh, neat. Yeah.
So
you were on, I mean, you've been on a few times, but we had a main interview and you told your story, and I don't think at that time we were doing the lightning round, but so basically I asked you a question, you can answer it or you can pass, something we have a little bit of fun with. What do you think?
sure.
All right, great. What is the heaviest item in your land out or emergency kit?
I have a couple things in that item, and a couple things there, but they all seem to weigh about the same. So I'm not so sure. I mean, maybe my spot. Nothing is really heavy there. My Swiss Army knife. I kind of have this little Ziploc bag, and it's got
Okay.
a bunch of items there.
Which extremity gets the coldest for you up there? Hands, feet, or face, or all of the above?
Well, the right answer is if you dress correctly and you have the right gear, then none of the above. But that's maybe a separate discussion for winter ridge flying, right? Because I would say in the absence of my very handy, wonderful electric socks, my feet get the coldest very quickly.
Front seat or rear seat?
Well, depends on the flying that you want to do, right? I would say for the most of my flying, there's only one seat, right?
Right.
But most of the 2-seat flying that I do is instruction, right, and coaching and things like that, and I enjoy
Right.
doing this. And and for that, the experience is best for the for the student out in the front, right, most of the time. And
Right.
so
Yep.
by virtue of making the 2-seat experience, as I intend it, I would most certainly say the back seat, right?
The thing that most has your mind preoccupied on flight day morning.
In the spirit of your question of your lightning round, I would say pass, but for the very reason that I think that preoccupied is the wrong word here, right? Essentially, if you're doing things right on the morning of a given flight, you should not be preoccupied about anything. And if you are preoccupied about something, then you are doing something wrong. And that,
Okay.
then maybe you should actually be considering about not flying and dealing with whatever that preoccupation is.
I like the answer. Absolutely, yeah. No, good advice. Outside of any competition, what is your favorite glider to fly for recreation or cross country?
I would answer that is that it depends on what kind of flying you want to do. And I understand that you said it's recreational flying, but the thing is for me, there's a wide spectrum of recreational flying. And I would say my two favorite gliders to fly are, the glider that I've been given permanent access to is the Duck Hawk and the 126. That's in my club.
What is your favorite soaring book?
Oh, I would say George Moffat's Winning on the Wind.
Nice.
That one, I thought was very enjoyable.
What's the coolest soaring related video or YouTube you've seen lately?
I'd have to pass because there's too many to think of. I can't, I cannot give you, can't give you one off the top of my head.
There's a lot out there now, which is great for the soaring community. Yeah, we're definitely getting a lot.
Yeah,
of
no, it's wonderful.
You're flying around in a place with verdant farmland and gentle rolling hills. You have to land out. Slight uphill with a 15-knot tailwind, or would you prefer slight downhill with a 15-knot headwind?
My true feeling is, well, why would you be in a position where you would have to be dealing with a field like that, right? I mean, you should be thinking about the wind and the terrain and all these kinds of things the whole time. And, why did you box yourself into a corner? But in the spirit of the question, I have to be an instructor. I have to, kind of hedge my bets a little bit. In the spirit of the question, if we're assuming, a large field and we're assuming, that everything else is held constant in a way that you can frame the question as such, I would err on the side of going uphill with a tailwind. I mean, look, is there a point when, the field is 1 degree down and it's pretty soft and the headwind will do better? Probably. Slope is something that is my primary concern in looking at a field, and wind is my secondary concern. Yes, the question is trying to say, okay, where do they cross over, right? But I would say that if the slope is reasonably perceptible, and that then I would err on the side of trying to land up slope.
Emergency, you have two options: jump out with a parachute or land in a lake.
When it's warm, I would certainly land in a lake, no question. But when it gets cold, like in the winter, particularly in a remote area, even in early spring or most of spring, really, like until it gets pretty warm.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in a remote area where there's no people around, you may very well die of hypothermia well before you get help. So that's the context I've thought up a lot about it. Now if it's reason, but most of the time when people fly is typically warm, I would certainly say land in a lake as opposed to pulling the parachute. I mean, if the lake is big enough, and you think you have a very good chance of getting out and all that kind of thing, there's lake is a very controllable landing.
If looking for good lift, would you rather follow a raven, a vulture, a hawk, or an eagle?
Eagle, most certainly, no question.
Bucket hat, cap, bandana, or stocking cap?
I have a soft cap that has a shorter brim, and certainly no button at the top. And it's a hat that can also put on a kind of I think it's called a neck skirt, so it keeps my neck from getting burned.
15 meter, 18 meter, or 25 meters?
15.
Vintage gliders, metal or wood?
Is the question metal or wood, or is it vintage metal or wood?
Well, if it's a vintage glider, would you prefer metal or wood?
Doesn't matter. The material of the glider really doesn't change all that much. I mean, I've flown quite a bit in 126s. I've flown in a K-13 once, so that's a wooden glider. But I don't think the material really strongly drives whether the glider is worth flying or not, other than if it's it's a nice glider and it's worth flying.
Vario sound in sync or quiet?
Oh, definitely. The Vario sound in sync, no question. You get a lot of information from that. Even with the standard, I mean, like new variometers, they have the netto tones and all this kind of stuff, which is great. And people kind of really configure that. But even with the standard one, you can differentiate in the, if it's -2 or -1 or -0.05, right? And that, if you get used to listening to the downtone, you can tell if you're in consistent good air or not. But even in the absence of kind of running the energy, so to speak, even if you're just talking about climb and glide, that as you approach a thermal, right, and even if you hit the sink on the edge of it, and the variometer plummets, and then as you start entering the thermal, right, and you see it kind of traverse the gradient, it goes boo, and then it goes beep, 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 and all that, right? But that initial transition, gives you a lot of information. So so you're already a step or two ahead as you hit the lift. Whereas if you only have the uptone, then you start responding to things already on the back foot.
I want to take a minute and thank and tell you about our newest sponsor, Wings and Wheels. They've been serving the soaring and sport aviation community for more than 30 years now. They have the largest and most comprehensive inventory of sailplanes and soaring supplies in the U.S. Nearly everything you find on their site is in stock and ready for same-day shipping. They're proud to be an exclusive American representative for HPH Ltd., manufacturer of the finest quality sailplanes. The HPH Twin Shark is the newest 20-meter two-place sailplane on the market. Their staff has thousands of hours of flying experience in gliders and airplanes, staffed by Adam, Kelly, Julie, and Sean. You can bet a friendly voice will answer when you call. They're located in Eagle, Idaho, in their new commercial building with a warehouse built to their specifications. And that was completed this year. Whether shipping domestic or international, your soaring-related supply list is covered. They would love for you to come and visit the next time you're in the Boise area. You can check them out on wingsandwheels.com. We're super excited to have them on the pod. Spoilers on turn to final, open or closed?
Depends on how you've set up your approach, right?
Right.
I know that there are people out there that strongly advocate against it, and they advocate against it because it increases the stall speed, of the glider, and that's a source of concern. However,
yep.
In choosing your approach speed, that should be easily accounted for. Where I normally fly, because we have a fair amount of obstacles and trees and have a kind of a tricky approach, you want a pretty steep approach, and you're the notion, so on base, on base and final, you have a fair half to 2/3 to 3/4 and sometimes full spoiler for a little bit to get over the last obstacle. And so you're the notion of closing the spoilers on base and then opening them up again on final, it's certainly doable, but I don't view that as being necessary. And I'm very comfortable, and I very often will, maintain spoilers through the base to final turn. The kind of the fundamental point is that if you have good coordination and if you choose an appropriate airspeed, then it really shouldn't matter. And I understand where people come from there, and I understand in places where it's big and flat, where people do lower energy approaches just because they can. I mean, you can enter at 500-600 feet in a place that is big, wide, and open, and I can understand in those kinds of scenarios, especially if a person miscalculates a little bit, that that could be good guidance. But where we fly, we very routinely will do base and final, with a fair amount of spoiler.
Last time you looked at the compass?
I mean, my glider doesn't have one. So I'll answer that question a little bit of a different way, actually. The last time I looked for a compass, I can answer that question exactly. The last time I looked for a compass was in summer of 2012. And if I went and looked back in my logbook, I can give you the exact day.
Nice.
Because it was Ron Schwartz's glider, 428, when I went to Texas. We were flying as a team out there, and so we took off. I took off, and I sort of figured that this big flat expanse. It's the first time I was out of the Midwest, that in Midlothian, Texas, that it would be very nice to have a compass, right, and to kind of get a sense of my direction. And I remember very distinctly looking at the panel and scanning it back and forth a couple times, and like, man, Ron Schwartz does not have a compass. Who would have thought? So actually, yeah. So actually, very distinctly, that was not no. I mean, I had GPS and all that sort of thing, so I really didn't need it. But that was the last time I looked for a compass in a glider.
Gatorade or water in summer flights?
I mean, Gatorade. I think I tend to do the electrolyte push before I fly, especially in contests, and after I land. But when I'm flying, it's just water. And then I think most of that probably has to do with that my preferred drinking vessel is my Camelback, and if you use Gatorade in that, then it's going to get really clogged up and nasty.
Yep, exactly. So you stop at a gas station on your way to the glider port. Do people ever ask what's in the trailer? And if so, do you mess with them and say it's an alligator or something else? Or do you say it's a glider?
No. I mean, I've had a number of really interesting encounters like that, actually. It also depends on what kind of trailer you have. If you have a 126, it's a nice open trailer. I mean, people can tell exactly what they're looking at, right? Minus the engine part, right? But it's actually the fun one there is when you're driving along, and I noticed that every third vehicle notices the glider. Like most people are so zoned out and oblivious that
Right.
because you like as you get bored, driving these long distances, you kind of look over your shoulder, right, and you just watch these people
Yeah.
hunched over their steering wheel, right, and then every third
Yeah.
car you'd see the kids in the back, doing this mime, like, look, there's an airplane over there, like, this is so amazing, this is so cool, and which is really funny. But that's mostly a 126 thing, people, with the enclosed
Yeah.
trailers, they don't seem to notice as much. But I had an interesting encounter like that with the trailer, when I was driving out in the middle of nowhere in Utah. And so, I was driving this national park out there, and after a contest out there, and this is a place where you see a head-on car like maybe once every 10 minutes, right? It's very remote.
Right.
And so, I remember stopping at one of these little overlooks of sorts, and there was this rented car and a couple, and they're looking at me, they're looking at the car, and they're looking at the trailer, and kind of did this a couple times, and finally they just couldn't take it anymore, and so they finally, they just the fellow asked me in this German accent, what you hauling out there, because it's just the last thing you would expect. It's like a psychedelic thing, like how's this thing just mysteriously just appeared out of nowhere in the middle of the desert,
Yeah.
and so and then I just kind of kick into gear, and I open up the trailer and I pull out the LS3, and I and spend 20 minutes explaining all the things about soaring and how you can go. He told me he's from Berlin, and so you can go, and told him that there's many glider clubs
Oh,
out there. You
nice.
should try it out and all this sort of thing. So yeah, you definitely encounter some interesting folks along the way, but it's you kind of determine if they're worthy enough of opening up the clamshell or not. If they're really worthy, you pull out the glider fuselage.
Yeah. Gin and tonic, Corona beer, craft IPA, red wine, white wine, scotch, or iced tea?
Before or after flying?
Or none of the above?
Before or after flying?
After flying, yes, very important.
Yeah. Well, what I would say, it's going to be a Yingling Porter. That's going to be my drink of choice. In the absence of that, it's going to be some other kind of porter. In the absence of that, it's going to be a red wine. So,
nice.
How about you?
The Yingling from Pottsville, PA.
Indeed,
right?
Indeed.
I would go for the Yingling.
Ah, well, and I like the Black and Tan,
Definitely.
but I realized that, I like the lager, I like the Black and Tan more, and I like the porter even more, and I reckon it's, the Black and Tan, it's the porter that's driving the liking,
Yeah. So one more: steak, salmon, fried chicken, or garden salad?
Well, it depends on the day, I suppose. It's all of the and on some days it's the salad, and some of the other days it's all the above, right?
Yeah, right.
I was going to say, with regards to food, after flying in these long days, I would in France, they didn't. Their portion sizes are not quite the same as out of the States, and but I had a common statement, which was to the effect of, if the question is food, the answer is yes. So, and so that's, I think that's
They bring out the menu and you say yes.
And I think that, well, in these kind of buffet thing, not where they like go and give you like little portions of food, right? Where they kind of hand it over to you. They say, "Would you like this or would you like this?" And or like, "Would you like?" It's like, "Yes, just give me it all."
Oh, Daniel, that was fun. Thank you for hanging out with us on the podcast.
Of course,
it's been nice catching up with you and hearing about your competition there in France.
My pleasure. Always
and you know
fun.
me, I'll be checking in with you again.
Of course, and
find out what you're up to.
Always happy to help.
What's it look like in the future?
How far in the future?
This season is that it for you, or are you just gonna do a little bit of soaring, or any more competitions?
Oh no. Well, competitions. No, that's over. But soaring wise, I mean, more or less every weekend I'm at the airport.
Right.
I will, competition wise, it's not so much for the contest, but just to go up to the meet. I may come up to Massa for a weekend and fly with JP Stewart somewhere. And then, and certainly going into the winter, the ridge season kicks in, and that's always fun. But, basically, so long as it's flyable, I fly, man. And we fly all year, other than, when it gets really cold and, really snowed in or things like that.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Daniel, have a good one. We will catch up with you soon.
Sure. It's always a pleasure, Chuck. Always a pleasure.
I have some exciting news, especially for you Condor pilots out there. We are glad to have our sponsor, Just Soaring, back with a couple of updates about their Glider Sim Pro, a sailplane simulator cockpit for Condor soaring. Their website is all new and now has a couple of videos to look at, updated product pictures and specs, and even a facts section to help answer some of your questions. If you follow the Soaring Academy on Instagram, you've probably seen one of the first production units in operation there at Crystal Airport, and so far it's a big hit with their students and instructors. Just Soaring is also proud to be the lead sponsor of the first ever FAI-sanctioned esports glider race. That's right, the Sailplane World Grand Prix is coming in September. The winning pilot gets a Glider Sim Pro. You'll be seeing lots more of their glider sim rigs across the U.S. and the rest of the world in the coming months, so check them out at justsoaring.com on the web or just.soaring on Instagram.
We are excited to bring you another new segment, Simon Says from Flying Simon. If you haven't already, make sure you check out Flying Simon's YouTube channel. Lots of good stuff on it. So take it away, Simon.
I just came back from coaching at the National Juniors competition in the Netherlands, and it was a lot of fun. It is a very relaxed competition that so many pilots fly as their first competition, and me included. I was there 6 years ago, so it was quite nice to return as a coach. The format of the competition is as follows. The tasks are usually shorter than they would be for competitions for novices, and in the morning there's a presentation from someone giving information about a specific subject in gliding. For example, choosing your starting time, thermaling better, or doing your final glide. And then next to this there's also 2 coaches flying in the air with the competitors to support from the air as well. This was one of my tasks, flying along with the competitors in my LS4. And it was really interesting to become a coach. Not only did I have to refresh my knowledge on McCready theory because I had to give a presentation on that, I also had to change my way of flying. Normally when you see someone low, you think, well, great, that's someone I already got in the bag. But now when somebody is low, you think, oh, how am I going to save this person? And most of the times I ended up pulling air brakes to get next to them and then hope to help them get back up, which was quite exhausting, but also a lot of fun. Also, when you become a coach, you have to look critically at your own flying and think of the things that have helped you the most. And what I realized then is that something that has helped me most is something that most glider pilots wouldn't name as something critical, at least not the experienced ones, because they're already so comfortable. And it is to become comfortable in your glider. When you haven't done any competitions, you just have to find out what works for you. For example, what is your best seating position? What kind of food do you like to eat during flying? Do you drink? What do you like to drink? How do you pee? These are all questions that are overlooked so many times. And I would say the most important one of these is to get comfortable after you had a stressful situation. So one of the things I would do when I just started was to cramp up. So if it was really low, I would cramp up in the hopes that that would give me a better thermal. But once I got back up, that cramp wouldn't stop. So nowadays, I always reward myself if I get back from low altitude. For example, by eating a cookie or singing a song. And nowadays, this has become a routine. But back in the days, it's so important to get comfortable in your glider. So next time you sit in the cockpit, try and ask yourself, am I sitting comfortable? Do I have everything that I want to have with me? And is there any way I can improve my situation? I'm sure it will help your flying.
Thank you, Simon. And thank you all for hanging out with us for this episode. It's been fun chatting with you all. So until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and happy soaring. If you would like to say hi and let us know where you are enjoying the podcast, we would love to hear from you. If you are a glider pilot and want to share your aviation journey, contact us at chuck@soaringthesky.com or send us a message on our website at soaringthesky.com and Chuck will get in touch with you. We hope you join us next time for another soaring adventure here on Soaring the Sky, a Glider Pilots podcast. Soaring the Sky is written and produced by Chuck Fulton, co-producer Mitch Thompson. Original music for the podcast was written and produced by Kim Spangler. Graphic design for the podcast was created by Zachary Fulton. Voiceover work was done by Michelle Perez.